Alrighty, our next speaker should be joining us soon. It's going to be Luca Amili from InSilicoTrials.
Yep.
Hello, Luca. Can you hear me?
Hello. I can hear you very well. Thank you.
All right, excellent.
Let me share this.
Okay, I'll go ahead and stop in my screen, and then you go ahead and share yours.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Here we go. Sorry. Where is it? Okay. Can you see that? Can you see the screen?
I can see the screen. Give us a thumbs
Perfect.
up,
Okay.
attendees. All right.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. No, sorry, because last time I started to talk for 5 minutes before understanding that it was not sharing, so it's better to check. It's better to check as the slides are going to show you are very, very interesting, I hope, for the audience. So thank you very much for the very interesting presentation that was done before that set the scene for what I'm going to talk about. So InSilicoTrials is working with a lot of these kind of technologies and a company also to hyper-accelerate drug and device development. And today we're going to mention how some AI and modeling tools following also FDA and EMA recommendation, but also linked to medical device in Europe, so linked to the MDR, are taking this kind of approach to become more and more relevant to be able to reach the market with new products. I am Luca Amili, I'm CEO and founder of InSilicoTrials. So what is happening from the regulatory point of view is that both FDA and the European Parliament are starting to endorse the use of innovation in clinical trial, because the mechanism of development at the moment, we can say, is really, really complex and require a lot of time, a lot of money. Here you can see that the FDA is saying that now computer generate a little part of the data used for regulatory approval, but what they are targeting is that in the future, virtual patient and computer will generate up to 50% of the data used for decision making. Of course, many of these elements will also be used for internal de-risking. And it's very interesting to see that an important regulator that is working both on drugs and devices is going this direction. The fact that Tina Morrison, coming from the modeling simulation FDA, now is the director of the Office of Regulatory Science at the FDA. I would say that for the community is really, really relevant topic, because despite the fact that the modeling simulation is not the only way, let me say, to do innovation in clinical trial, it's very important to have someone that know what is the potential of simulation driving this kind of regulatory science involvement. But at the same time, so we had in Europe last year a very important decision from the political point of view, with a vote by the parliament. It was basically 99% pro, the decision to go towards the ban of use of animals in the drugs and device development. At the moment, there are 12 million of animals used per year, and the target is to reach in the future 0 animal use per year. There are a company like Roche that already decided by 2030 they will not use any more animal in their own development. And it's quite also relevant from a scientific point of view if we consider that we're going more and more towards patient-specific drugs and devices, and the variability through different patients are completely not replicable in the environment of the animal testing, because there are a lot of differences that need to be taken into account. These are some examples. We've heard some example in the device, in the drugs. I'm going to show some slide with some real use case we're working on in the here drugs, where, for example, the simulation has been used for the evaluation of cardiac safety of a new compound, or a simulation has been used for the device optimization or a drug device combination. And another interesting project we work on, and later I will show you some metrics, for the use of digital twin in the multiple sclerosis disease progression. In this case, there is a project that is generating data that are going to be used by a regulator for decision-making on specific drugs. So very interesting approach, not only from the preclinical phase, but also from clinical phase. And oncology, that is a very complex environment, is also benefiting from this kind of exercise, as for example, it's possible to simulate what could be the chemotherapy effect on the prediction of neutrophil count. On the medical device, there is an interesting element differently from the drug that is linking the simulation to specific tests. So it's possible to reproduce in a medical device standard test methods that can be used to generate information to support the safety or effectiveness of the device. We heard already elements and presentation regarding use of modeling in the device development, but the fact that it's possible to replicate with a strong accuracy standard test means that you don't have to discuss with a regulator or with another internal decision-making stakeholder on what you have done, because the application of standard methods is really helping to consider the results in a very effective way. Here we can have some example. So standard tests from MRI safety on plant medical device, or metallic orthopedic hip femoral stems that is tested through this ASTM F299620 standard, or another test for the femoral component of a knee, or a characterization of a radial resistive force for a stent through an ISO standard. So these are very, very interesting opportunities where the application of simulation is not only limited to the generation of evidences following specific interest in terms of science, but also regeneration of evidences in terms of replica of standard that can be also very easily validated through a physical process. So in this case, the validation, that is one of the most complex area in the simulation in the medical device, can be easily compared with what happened in the simulation environment. I mentioned saving, I mentioned the time, and then it's related to the cost. These are some examples where the application of modeling simulation tools are able to give a strong push towards this kind of time saving. We can see I've mentioned cardiac safety. With the right tool, you're able to spend 1 minute instead of 2-3 days. For MRI safety, 3 hours instead of 2-3 weeks. Orthopedic test in 1 day, combining different simulation instead of 2 months. A multiple sclerosis control arm instead of 4 months, 1 hour. So time saving up to 99.9%, where the advantage for the user and the company is really significant in terms of efficiency. We do that with a very innovative approach, and we are working on this platform where we are receiving models from, at the moment, more than 70 scientific partners all around the world, university and research centers. These components are integrated in the platform to be used in an easy way, and then become usable by big pharma, medtech, biotech, CROs that many times ask also for collaboration in terms of use of this very complex tool. But anyway, they are available in a scalable manner. These are some screenshots of what the platform is able to do now from the imaging point of view, simulation of fluid dynamics, synthetic control arm with drugs, or report on in a way that is acceptable by EMA or FDA. Where we can apply this kind of simulation, the preclinical and clinical are full of a lot of examples, from drug repurposing to real-world evidence, real-world data, where the simulation could be applied. What is very, very interesting in the pharma development, for example, is the fact that you don't need to substitute the traditional approach to create saving, but if you optimize it, and if you're able to reduce the number of patients by 10 or 20%, you risk that you are saving already millions. but especially if you are able to execute simulation to generate evidences to help the planning of the trial, the planning, the designing of the protocol, you are making a lot of efficiency. You are de-risking investment, and especially in biotech, can become very risky because the biotech don't have opportunity to go through many trials once one is failing. So the use of simulation can really help in this de-risking of R&D investment. In the medical device, there are different areas of application, from discovery and ideation up to regulatory use through design concept, design details, design verification, bench tests, and in vivo studies through, for example, a replica of already developed standards, or going to a certification. This kind of application are, of course, different, but one from the other. But when you start to use a simulation at the first steps, then you could have an involvement of this simulation that go through the history of the device, and also going to something that could become parametric. You could create your internal knowledge in terms of applicable tools that can be used and reused for other product that the company is working on. Here, there are some reference to some element in terms of regulatory review of modeling simulation in the medical device field applied in the US that is very active, producing report or working to generate standard like the VMB40 by ASME, or to say to company how to assess the credibility of computational modeling and a simulation in medical device submission. Another interesting aspect is that already in 2016, they have issued this report on how to submit the outcome of computational modeling studies in the medical device submission, because they were receiving so many different approaches and so many different report that was becoming a problem in terms of analysis of every different tools and every different report generated. But also in Europe, thanks or due to the MDR, there are some opportunity linked to the use of simulation in the medical device. Here I mention a couple of annex where there is a specific mention of simulation modeling as a way to support the development. Of course, we know that there is not easy to deal with, in this case, not regulators, but notified body to go through the use of simulation for approval. But this is something that, of course, where the different notified bodies are working on to gain experience and gain knowledge, as the requests from the customer, especially from the big ones, are more and more in terms of efficiency, and so use of simulation, as well as a use of traditional approach to go through the MDR. This is a process that will take some time, and there is a culture that needs to be created, as well as probably some optimization in the MDR, probably not only for the reference to the modeling simulation, but in general. But this will take also sometimes as the probably reaction will become once more and more company will start to have problem with this kind of new standard. We have seen that in Europe, I mean, it's not part of the European Union, but recently Swiss decided to consider the FDA approval good for the Swiss market. So basically creating a backdoor for a European company going to the Swiss market in terms of medical device, going directly to US, having approval by the FDA, and then going to the Swiss market to sell the product. So there are a lot of things going on. Also, we have some active discussion with notified bodies, and we hope that creating culture, creating some sensibility on this kind of topic, the modeling simulation will be more and more accepted. In the pharma, here I just mentioned FDA. Then if you want, we can also go through the EMA with other details offline. There are many content. Recently, FDA issued this document here, Success and Opportunities in Modeling Simulation for FDA, where they are referring to the way that CBER, CDER, CDRH, and many other internal groups are using simulation in different stage. So there is a strong production by the FDA of draft guidance or guidance for industry, where it's possible to look at the application of simulation as a way to complement the traditional approach, or in some case reduce the traditional approach significantly using this kind of things. We can expect that in the next few years, it will be not possible to go through regulatory approval in US for drugs without providing data regarding modeling simulation. And probably this will become a more and more strong push towards the market to create some relevant use cases that will drive also a small and medium company to adopt more and more this approach, as a big company like J&J, Medtronic, Novartis, Roche, and all the others are already using this kind of tools to generate elements to help their own decision-making regulatory approval. What is interesting in this document from the FDA, that is at page 21, they're also referring to one of the projects that, for example, us with other Avicenna Alliance members are involved with. That is the creation of the good simulation practice. This is an activity going on and with 130 researchers that is creating the first community created content regarding the way to conduct an in silico trial, to be able to at least do some steps in a structured way, and to be able to comply with some good practice that in the future maybe could become something released by regulators, as they mentioned the fact that there is an opportunity to consider establishment of GSP to foster harmonization across the FDA and where appropriate with international bodies. Thank you for your attention. Here you have my references, and happy to answer your questions.
All righty, thank you so much, Luca. Very insightful. We have a question here. I'm going to go ahead and look it up. All right, our first question is, now you have physical test labs for devices. Do you foresee, or does it exist already, virtual test labs where companies send their device design to you and then you perform in silico tests and then provide a certificate?
Well, this is what we are for. So absolutely, yes. I can tell you that the certificate is probably something more complex, but what could be done, because there are non-official certification opportunities. So the certificate, say, are the one with low value, like the one from a regulatory body, or if you talk about medical device from TÜV or BSI or all the others notified bodies. What is possible to do is to certificate that, for example, the VMV40 has been used for the verification and validation of the model, that validation has been done with clinical tests, etc., etc. So that level of confirmation is possible. And I can tell you, Eric, that this is something that, for example, we're already doing with some customers in the medical device fields in different areas. So, yep, happy to talk about that.
Wonderful. We have one more question here. Okay. For medical products, it is often hard to find good compliance and functioning clinical proof. Clinical results are often poorly documented. How do you calibrate your systems?
We are working with a lot of hospitals and research centers so that we are able to combine the simulation with clinical evidences, doing retrospective studies, doing evaluation of how the patient is responding to the treatment while the trial is going on, and we have already generated data through the simulation. So this kind of match with clinical evidences are continuous. So you never end the process. There is continuous clinical validation, and the more you can do that, the better it is. Of course, you cannot do everything before starting a project. So we do a first level of testing, And then once a project is defined, we identify what could be the target population for this kind of clinical validation. And we are able to cope with virtual patient coming from the hospital partners that are providing us with images and clinical data to make it, as well as test once you go into patients, this kind of ongoing testing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for answering those questions for us. And thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.